Very good morning, sir. Dr. Madan, sir.
I'm here. Namaskaram.
Very good morning.
Namaskaram. Namaskaram. Greetings from.
Madam, good morning.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
So, shall we start?
Definitely, sir.
Yes. Okay. Dr. Janaki, please.
Namaskaram, madam.
Namaste, sir. Namaste, sir. Very nice, sir. Very nice knowing that you are joining us.
Well, very happy that
pleasure and honor to be with you on the same stage.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with so many people who are presented already, and also to know that I'm sharing the stage with person in charge of curriculum development for
yes. Thank you, sir.
Things that we need discussing, and I hope at some point we'll get a chance to discuss this.
Definitely, sir.
Because you're very lucky that for your Silver Jubilee, you had Modi ji inaugurating and presenting for yourself. So he's watching us now from somewhere and saying if we do the right things, he will guide us a little bit. So let us come together and see how we can do some important, both curriculum development, not only research, but also curriculum development is very important.
Definitely, sir. We are doing our best to bring in and particularly in the field of modern medicine, sir. Our Medical Council of India has come up with a competency-based medical education, introduced new concept. So the young doctors emerging are competent enough in many of the skills. So skill developments have been given a lot of importance. So the curriculum has been tweaked quite a lot so that the emerging young doctors are more confident.
I was looking through the university webpage yesterday. I'm so happy to see that for a state with 62 million people, you have so many wonderful institutions. And I will present it on my third slide just to review some of the things. And when we look at...
earlier we did have educationists, but many of them wouldn't lead. But nowadays we do have leaders also, sir, so that they're taking this in the right path. And we have this NEP also being introduced, National Education Policy is being introduced. Of course, some of the concepts have been taken up from the West, but for the good of the education system here, sir. We needed this because for the past 30 years, there was no policy in education in India. And India is evolving, sir.
What is important is that we are dynamic in how we evolve things, you see. And unfortunate opportunities like COVID that's going on will give us a chance to review what we are doing. And we shouldn't wait.
And today's talk of yours, sir, would emphasize, like, how interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary research would have helped to face this COVID situation.
Exactly. I'll try.
Thank you, sir and madam. With your kind permission, we would like to start the session.
Please, sir, please.
Good afternoon, one and all. Good morning, sir. I, Dr. Janaki KV, Program Assistant, Peripheral Pharmacovigilance Center, Sri Dharmasthala Manjunatheshwara College of Ayurveda and Hospital, Hassan, welcome you to Day 8 International Webinar on the Opportunities and Challenges in Medical Research. On the behalf of Department of Research and Development, Sri Dharmasthala Manjunatheshwara College of Ayurveda and Hospital. I warm welcome to dignitaries, resource persons, and participants to International Webinar SDM E Samshodhana 2020. Let us move on to today's session, Day 8 of E Samshodhana 2020, organized by Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Bengaluru, as a part of their Silver Jubilee celebration. Hosted by Sri Dharmasthala Manjunatheshwara College of Ayurveda and Hospital, Hassan. At the outset, we are fortunate to have and humbly welcome two stalwarts. One is Dr. Pushpa Sarkar, Director, Curriculum Development Cell, R&D, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Bengaluru, Karnataka. Welcome you, madam.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Another as a resource person, Dr. Madan, Thangavelu, Genome Biologist, Medical Research Council, Laboratory of Molecular Biology, Cambridge, UK. We welcome you, sir. We welcome Dr. Prasanna N. Rao, Principal, SDM College of Ayurveda and Hospital, Hassan. Welcome you, sir. So we should start today's session. First of all, let me give a brief introduction of our keynote addressee, Dr. Pushpa Sarkar, who graduated from Mysore Medical College. Madam served at JSS Medical College in various capacities, served as a Dean and Director, Mandya Institute of Medical Sciences. At present, Madam is working at RGHS as a Director, Curriculum Development and Research Development. Undeniably, we are privileged to have Madam to address and enlighten all of us on today's session. I request Dr. Pushpa Sarkar, Madam, kindly address us on this occasion. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you so much. A very good morning to Dr. Madan Thangavelu, and a very good afternoon to all the others who are listening in India, all the participants and the staff and delegates of SDM College of Ayurveda. Now, basically, when we speak about research or in any field, science or any other field, now this has to evolve through a rigorous and continuous research. Now, when we come to Ayurveda, now we say that Ayurveda is pure science and is based on more than 5,000 years of clinical practice, ancient science of India, where we are very proud of. Now, Ayurveda is a science of life. It says it's a science of life with a holistic approach to health and personalized medicine. Now, what is lacking is evidence-based research. That's why we require evidence-based research is highly needed for global acceptance. As of now, global recognition and global acceptance, we need evidence-based research more in Ayurveda faculty. Now, this needs, what is lacking here is the research methodology is where we are lagging behind. So we need a further advancement in the research methodology. Now this, whatever we're talking about the research methodology are the research protocols, what we are talking of, it should be more balanced, comprehensive, and equally emphasizing both in the literary field, in the experimental research, as well as the clinical research. Now here, and for this cause, I highly appreciate and also congratulate the principal, Dr. Prasanna Rao, and all his team of SDM College of Ayurveda for having organized this series of webinars on opportunities and challenges in medical research. Now, this is the need of the hour, actually, it's much needed. And this is going to enrich the knowledge of all the practitioner Ayurveda specialists who are participating here, and also motivate the young scientists who have a passion for research to involve in the true research in the true sense, not to obtain any degree or not to obtain anything. Research is a passion where it is research, like you're going to research, because Ayurveda has loads and loads to research. Now, the Central Council of Research in Ayurvedic Sciences, now they have been executing research programs in broad areas like fundamental research, it may be clinical research, it may be pharmacological research, it may be medicinal plant research, literary research, and so on. Now, I personally feel that emphasis has to be laid on the basic Ayurveda science rather than drug development research. As far as I'm seeing now, more emphasis is laid on preparation of drugs, concoctions, and so on and so forth for the treatment. But what is actually needed is we have rich source in Ayurveda, which is an ancient, for years together, more than 5,000 years old. So basic Ayurveda science research is required because many things have not been understood. So in the basic science, I request most of these young scientific researchers to get into research for the basic research of Ayurvedic science. Naturally, later on, this will support for other evolvement in Ayurveda research. Now, this will be more logical and supporting the Ayurveda practice. Now, the strength of Ayurveda lies in the uniqueness. It is unique principles and approach towards, the logical basis of everything using the naturally occurring substances. More than synthesis, there's naturally occurring substances, wide flora and fauna which contribute to this Ayurvedic science is the richness in Ayurveda. So I feel that this research has to happen in a very broadly. Now, Ministry of Ayush also, Government of India, that also intends to disseminate the merits of this Ayurveda systems across the globe. It has brought about integration of Ayurveda with so many of national programs. So it is widely reaching the rural population of India also, and awareness across India. Now, today, when it comes, this is about the basic research I'm talking of, and I don't know, because research is not taking, maybe because of the lack of motivation or because of lack of funds, it's always taking a backseat in India. But however, I'm happy that it is taking forward slowly, at least. Now, today's topic of the webinar is essential interdisciplinary research in the third millennium. Now, we have Dr. Madan Gopal, who is a pioneer in this, he has worked a lot, and he's going to enlighten how this is going to happen. Now, before dwelling into this, now it's very disheartening for me to notice, let alone in the present situation, let alone interdisciplinary, even intradisciplinary is not encouraged in the present scenario in many of the institutions or organizations, because they have demarcated between the subjects. The clinicians, they don't let the paraclinical or clinical experts to explore into their area, or each of them feel that it's their own area. They've demarcated. And this notion has to go. The science is one. Science cannot be split. It is across. There should be no borders for this. So I feel that everybody needs to encourage this. Now, when we talk about this interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary research, now this involves combining of two or more academic disciplines into a research project. Now, it draws the knowledge from several fields. Now, it's about creating something by thinking across the boundaries, as I was telling, thinking across the boundaries, and which crosses the traditional boundaries between many of the disciplines, academic disciplines. Now, interestingly, research is moving towards more interdisciplinary endeavors as of now globally. Now, effective collaboration between the professionals from different disciplines is necessary to maximize the potential benefits of interdisciplinary research activity. Now, researchers from different disciplines, they need to interact, they need to work together, they share the ideas, information, concepts, and also their approaches. Not only share this, they need to modify these also. They need to modify these also so that they're better suited to deal with the problems, whereas the solutions are beyond the scope of one particular discipline. So put together, all the disciplines coming together, or the related disciplines coming together, which can solve the problems. For example, I was talking with Dr. Madan, the present scenario of COVID-19, which has been really scaring people out of their wits. Now, if at all there was an interdisciplinary research into this, we would have tackled this COVID-19 better, I feel. Instead of depending on a particular one discipline, each of these disciplines could have come up with a better solution, and we would have been able to dwell with this COVID-19 situation better. Now there's been a visible increase in the academic productivity as of now in the field of this interdisciplinary research, and we are entering a golden age, in fact. Now, these may be simple, they may be simple in this, like, what shall I say? Earlier, like, whenever you have this identification of plants, their species, it would be time consuming, and also the method would be complex. Now, we have seen that there are relevant modernized technologies which would very simply help you to diagnose the species of the particular plants, so that that time consuming would be done with. So other small gadgets, even this learning management system, when the technology comes with the medicine or any other field for that matter, they develop apps for that. They develop apps so that it is beneficiary to many fields. And science and technology also can come together. It's not only interdisciplinary, need not mean only between sciences. It can be between technology also, between environmental science, between, as I said, between engineering. So what is interdisciplinary now maybe become a discipline by itself later on. For example, if you take previously itself, this biomedical engineering or genetic engineering, all these they put together. Now they by themselves they are single disciplines now. Earlier biology and this science and engineering came together. Interdisciplinary research and collaboration, now as I was telling you, can produce substantial benefits to the scientists, to the practitioners and policymakers. Here I would emphasize that the joint knowledge production by researchers, by policymakers and other people who are involved in the society, who bring in policy changes or influence the societal factors. Now this is very much necessary to make science relevant for addressing challenges in case of disasters, in case of COVID. So now the funding bodies and other members should take note of the effectiveness of this and foster interdisciplinary research.
No voice, ma'am.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, madam. We are audible.
Audible now?
Yes, madam. We are audible.
Audible. I was inaudible since when, madam?
No. Just two seconds.
2 seconds. Okay, that's what. Like now, I'm just emphasizing on the fact about the policymakers and also about the funding agencies, where they have to lay emphasis for this interdisciplinary research, make more space, make it the research more innovative and also highly impact research that delivers solutions for the challenges in future too. This is what I'm forethinking. That's my thought. And government is working up, and we know that COVID-19 situation was well managed in Kerala because they were already equipped. They fought with the Nipah virus, and I think that the policymakers are aware that this many of the disciplines coming together to give solutions for such things. So, but the research should take a front seat, and the young researchers from Rajiv Gandhi University, I just want to mention that we have been supporting research. Rupees 5 crore is kept aside every year for research purposes. Student research is being encouraged. So here, for all the researchers over here, please come up with innovative research ideas, and Rajiv Gandhi University is there to support you people anytime. You can approach even the students, and I wish all the best to all the participants who are here, and encourage them to participate in true research. Thank you so much. I don't want to take much time, and I also want to listen to Dr. Madan Thangavelu. So wishing everybody all the very best. Over to Dr. Madan Thangavelu.
Thank you very much, madam. You rightly pointed about the young researchers to involve in the research with the innovative ideas. We express our gratitude for gracing the occasion and delivering the keynote address. Now I welcome Dr. Prasanna and Rao, Principal. Okay. Come to you once again, madam, from the organizing committee on the Day 8 International Webinar. Now we shall move on to the resource person. I am privileged to introduce Dr. Madan Thangavelu, who completed bachelor degree in agriculture and master's in the plant breeding genetics. Sir pursued PhD in the molecular genetics as an in-logs foundation scholar on the gene for the cytoskeletal protein actin at the erstwhile Plant Breeding Institute, Trumpington. Following a PhD in the molecular genetics from the University of Cambridge, Sir's recent academic affiliation have included research fellowships in the Department of Oncology, University of Cambridge, Medical Research Council Cancer Unit Cell, Cambridge, and Leverhulme Research Fellow, Medical Research Council Laboratory of Molecular Biology, Cambridge. Sir is a member of Mind Matter Unification Project of the Theory of Condensed Matter Group at the Cavendish Laboratory, Cambridge, and directed by the Professor Brian Josephson. Sir is a board member and a research director, European Ayurveda Association, and an international advisory board member in IU, International Quarterly Journal of Research in Ayurveda. Sir is an international editorial advisory board member, IUCARE, Journal of Ayurveda Case Reports, All India Institute of Ayurveda, New Delhi. Sir was also trustee of the Research Council for the Complementary Medicine, UK. Sir is the honorary adjunct professor in the Transdisciplinary University, Bengaluru, India. With this brief introduction, I welcome you, sir. Sir will deliver erudite talk on the special topic, Essential Interdisciplinary Research in the Third Millennium. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Changi. All of you, thanks particularly to Dr. Prasanna Rao, good friend, for having me here on this wonderful webinar. I've enjoyed all the presentations to date. Very, very rich collection of talks by so many wonderful speakers, starting with ex-Vice Chancellor Sarkar ji, and then one of our Vaidya Scientist Fellows, Sri Ranjani Jaydeep, talking from Canada, Pawan Kumar Kodatwar from NIA Jaipur, Katosh ji, who gave us a very, very wonderful talk, and then Ram Manohar. And yesterday, superb talk by Ravi Shankar ji. Everybody providing such rich, high value, high quality information for all of us to think about many things. Most of all, where are we in terms of engaging with this rich body of ancient knowledge that we have? Are we understanding it correctly? Are we appreciating it correctly? And what needs doing for the future? And that takes me to the theme of my presentation, where I ask, what is it that we can do, and what is it that we are not doing to bring Ayurveda and to prepare it for the third millennium? Now, my engagement with Ayurveda is over about 15 years or a little more. And what I've learned is only a very tiny fraction of what our past speakers and all of you in college and other parts of India have. But having engaged with Ayurveda over this period and looking at it almost every day, reading and learning a little more about Ayurveda, I feel this is what we have. Number one, we need a little more debate and discussion, and we must gradually evolve a very important program of work that has to be looked at slightly longer period of time, say about a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades, somewhere along that line, for several reasons, which I'll come to later in the talk. But I'm very, very confident that what we have in the ancient sciences is the way to go about developing not only a system of health and wellness, but also new approaches in this very controversial term called integrative medicine, and also health systems for all of the world for the future. And most importantly, developing a program of work in medical education and research. And I hope over the next few minutes, I can take you through a small journey and convince you that what we have is underappreciated, unappreciated treasure, and we have to do something about this. We can do much more about it. We are doing things about it, much more about it. And when Modi ji inaugurated the celebrations for the year-long celebrations that will take place there at the university, the Rajiv Gandhi University, what he offered was a very important and a very strong message, which is that it's a young university. It's at the prime of its youth. It's only 25 years old. And as with all young people, it's age to think even bigger and do even better. So he's offered us this suggestion, and he's inspired us with this. And it's lovely to see the kind of work that's being produced by the university and its associated colleges. It's also wonderful to see where the university is in its current state. So this is approximate statistics for the university. I hope I'm correct here. I couldn't gather the numbers for the allied health science colleges, of which there are very many. I couldn't count the whole numbers, but this is what you have in a small state with about 65 million. And are we using this resource correctly? Can we do much more? And are we appreciating the worth, the total worth of this collection that you have? Sometimes I feel we are, and most times I feel we are not. And this is the example that we are all worrying about, engaged with. This is what's happening in the country. We have, and this is an underestimate of what is happening in the country. This number may be close to 45 million or 50 million people who have all gone back to their homes, the villages. And there is very little that we could do for these people. And the troublemaker, this small virus. And how come we are not prepared for this? How come we can't do anything about this when we have this kind of richness in terms of education institutions? And what is it that we haven't done correctly? And what is it that we can appreciate from this? It's an opportunity. What is it that we can appreciate from this? And Modi ji's big call, try to be vocal about what is local. So every state to start to become proud of what it has and to understand its surroundings and environment better. I'll come back to this later in the talk. COVID is here. There are suggestions that it will go away. It might take a while. I mean, it's not the first time we've had pandemics. The human race has faced this many, many times in the past. What else awaits? Now, this is from the Department of Health here in the UK about high consequence infectious diseases. And of that, we have two types, the contact high consequence infectious diseases and the airborne diseases. So if you run through these lists, these are all potential problems for us. Nipah virus, we've had 2 attacks in India and Kerala. We've had H1N1 and the variants, the influenza virus. These are all waiting to appear at some point. And are we prepared for this? This is not scaremongering, but it can appear at any time. We've had plague in Gujarat some time back. Are we prepared for all this? Do all of us know about these things? So that is the first question. We should inform ourselves about it. And if we have information, we should share it. And here it is. It is within this kind of context that we are revisiting the Indian sciences. And here is a very important term that is revered by those in the academic Ayurvedic circles. I don't know if many people in the modern medicine world will know about this. And it's a very ancient term, possibly used for many millennia, maybe 5,000 years or more, at least in terms of textbooks, you will find this term. And this is what it means. Ability to withstand diseases. It doesn't have to be infectious diseases. It can be any type of disease. And it's the body's ability to withstand. Sometimes incorrectly translated as immunity. It means much more than immunity. And I've highlighted 2 or 3 things here. I've highlighted recommendations. This is all taken from recommendations made by the Central Council for Research in Ayurvedic Sciences. You can find all this information at this link. It uses terms which are as they would be used in the old texts, like Charaka Samhita, written about the most recent redaction about 2,500 years ago. Text possibly over 5,000 or 6,000 years or more. And the terms used there, I'm happy they have presented it this way, because this is almost what you would find in the ancient texts. Giloy to be used, tulsi to be used, amla, asparagus, cow's milk. And it says you use all this and it improves Vyadhi Samatva. Now, a lot of people will find this confusing. Which Giloy to use, how much to use, etc., etc. And the same thing here, recommendations for food and sleep. Can we clarify this? Is there a basis for this, just as what Madam just mentioned? I feel there is a scientific basis because it works, number one, so we have to go and find out. Number two, most importantly, that evidence is already there. When I look at the research literature, the 60 million or more papers that are available to all who have access to the internet and available at PubMed and other resources, you find that that every paper that is published is only validating what is written in these ancient texts. And how come we haven't connected with this knowledge? And the similar recommendations made from the Ministry of Ayush And keep in mind, this was made not only for India, but also for a global audience. How do we understand aspects like this, dinacharya or ritucharya? Do we in India understand these correctly? Maybe not. How do we expect people outside India to understand these things about dinacharya, ritucharya? Are we doing enough to take these messages out to the world? I don't know. I highlight here another section from that same document from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. And I have circled one little bit here about pudina, which is mint, and ajwain, caraway seeds. Also, there is this information here about the kwat, or kada, as they call it, which has tulsi, cinnamon, black pepper, ginger, etc., etc. Now, I've highlighted this for a simple reason, because when we look at the different modalities in the Ayush systems of medicine, you see parallels. So I put on the right-hand side here a formulation that comes from the Unani system of medicine. And this has been used for hundreds of years, is now recommended as a way to provide some form of resistance. And you can see the similarity between what is offered from the Ayush systems to what is available in the formulation presented to us by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now, my worry is if we go into these policy-making locations and say, do you see this pattern between Ayurveda and Unani systems? I think the answer might be a disappointing no. There isn't enough communication going on within the two systems. I will come back to how, based on contemporary evidence, how these things work. I won't go into detail, but I'll just point you in the direction of how one might want to think about how these two mechanisms work and how the different systems within the Ayush systems integrate in a modern biology, modern medicine consistent way. This knowledge has been around a long time. As I said earlier, the oldest textbook of medicine is the Charaka Samhita. As far as we know, there is no text older than this, and a text that is still used. And every time I get an opportunity to look into Charaka Samhita, I find that this text is futuristic. There are many aspects of the text that seems that is waiting for the time to come. It is written in advance of our time. And this is a text which was redacted the last time 2,500 years ago. And it still holds within it information that seems futuristic. It seems like we haven't quite understood what this is trying to tell us. How is this possible? A question for all of us, and I think worth more discussion and debate, whether we understand why this information seems timeless and why it is important for us. I highlight here the so-called Panchadasha Prakara, the 15 indicators of health as offered to us by the second Buddha, Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna lived somewhere around this area, and he brought us to the concept of shunyata, or emptiness. In many ways, this is so important to understand. In the small shloka, which translates to all is possible when emptiness is possible, nothing is possible when emptiness is impossible, highlights a very central paradigm that is important in every area of life, not just in terms of Ayurveda, not just in terms of medicine, but in every other aspect of life. Now, for those who can read Sanskrit, the 15 indicators, the Panchadasha Prakara, are listed here. Now, it starts off with food. And it says, a desire for food, at the right time, and proper digestion. Swadanam vibhaha, proper digestion. You must feel like eating food at the right time, and it must digest completely. And so on. The so-called recommendations, which any human being can understand, because it involves all those functions that are so central to being a human being. Eating, eliminating wastes, functioning of your organs, the state of your mind, the texture of your body, how you feel, sleep, which is central to us, and waking up from sleep. So as little indicators that every human being can understand. And every one of these terms given to us by Nagarjuna takes us deep into the deepest of physiology and the deepest principles of physiology that, if incorrect, lead to pathology. So for me, this is exciting because this is insight given to us by somebody who had no access to scientific instruments, etc., and given to us almost 2,000 years ago. How is this possible? So these are questions that we need to understand. 2,000 years on, we have another language, the language of genomics. And shown here on the left is a new language, a new script. And this is the health of your immune system, represented in terms of different genes and gene expressions, the language of the genes and how they talk, shown in different groups of individuals who show different responses to COVID-19. Somewhere up here is a group that are the acute responders. They are people who require acute care. And this is a very recently published study, less than 3 weeks old. The point I'm trying to say is for people who are not familiar with this side and can understand this, and for people who understand this and don't understand this, they all look like Sanskrit, basically. This looks like Sanskrit for somebody who doesn't understand it, but it's saying exactly what is here in the middle. And this bit looks like Sanskrit, which is Sanskrit for people who understand this, but don't know what Nagarjuna did. How are we going to bridge this divide? Is it easy to do? And who is responsible for this? Who's responsible for making this happen? These messages of a new language and wanting to appreciate a new language were all given to us by Sidney Brenner, the person who cracked the genetic code here in Cambridge. Sidney helped us understand how you have a link. What is the link between DNA, which has only 4 bases, to amino acids that are found in the proteins? How do you bridge this link between DNA and proteins? And he showed us how the genetic code works. Is this what is required for understanding and interpreting the language of life? We feel it is, and I feel the answer is in the text already, but we don't understand it correctly, or we don't interpret it correctly. Sidney, towards the last years of his life, left us with this comment. He says, how does the egg form the organism? And for him, that became the next question. You know, all life begins with one egg cell, and it's fertilization. How does it go on to form this organism? And the comment Sidney made in his Nobel lecture is highlighted here. He says, I'm still at the age of 76 excited by scientific research. The point Madam made, which is, and what some of our previous speakers made, it is an attitude. And that attitude stays with you till you die. You're a researcher. And he then goes on, science is something one is tied to for life. Are we able to make this happen for our students? Can we open up those areas? Perhaps this is what Modi ji is pointing us to when he says, do something bigger, do something larger, dream bigger. And we want to show that this is what we are doing for our students, and we want to do this for them. Now, the other thing Sydney mentions is that the endless quest for knowledge will continue as long as humans exist. And this is very much like what you will find in Charaka Samhita. The science of life has no finality. It will keep going on. Every cell is different and it evolves and it mutates and it privileges. When I read all of this and Sydney's comment that we need to teach biologists another language, and I've annotated it to also include teach a language, a new language, not only to biologists, but also to doctors. I feel Ayurveda has that language already. I don't think Sydney was aware of Ayurveda. If he knew about these texts when he was alive, he would have brought it out to show people what it is that is there in these old texts. This is the story of our life, from zygote to the body. So Sydney's question, how do we go from that one cell all the way to a human form? And shown here is the different stages, approximate stages on different days in embryogenesis, getting up to around this stage, stage 23, which is about this 60th day, when almost 90% of the identifiable structures are formed already. And this is so amazing. The chances of this going wrong are very, very few and between. Can we understand that? And do we need to understand? And what are the lessons we can have from our ancient sciences to understand it and to look at it differently? Now, this is where modern science, cell biology and modern genomic biology is today. We have gone past the human genome phase, which the human genome story is an old story, although it's less than 10 years old. The speed at which things have progressed and where we are today. We are at this one example, the Human Cell Atlas, running from the Broad Institute in America, where they hope to map and understand every cell in the human body. Now, Madam mentioned briefly about the need to bring in multiple disciplines to interface. And I highlight this text here by pointing to how a collection of minds have come together to enable this self project. We have biologists, clinicians, technologists, physicists, computational scientists, software engineers, mathematicians, and more working together. And they're developing new techniques, single cell analysis, single cell genomics. Now, I look at this story here of the Broad Institute, and I tell myself, if there is one other place in the world where a project larger than this can happen, that is Karnataka. And that is Bangalore. There is no other place in the world that has the human resources and the skills that we saw earlier, the list of colleges, to come together and make such world-class projects. I can't think of any other place in the world which can be cost-effective, which will have the manpower required, which will have the intellectual background required than the state of Karnataka. And maybe we can discuss this in the weeks and months ahead. Here is an example. Now, I'm going down into my journey, and here is an example of the simple thing, the human skin. Now, Nagarjuna mentioned the skin in his Panchadasha Prakara. The skin must be good. And it is a very important part of Ayurvedic treatment and diagnosis of the skin. And if we look at it through the eyes of the Broad Institute's single cell and cell type work, this is what the human skin would look like. Now, we are all expected to know about all these cells, but most of this, the collection of cells and cell types that is under your skin and that is making you live a healthy life is so exciting. There are so many different cell types there. There are cell types that sense touch, of course, one of the aspects of Ayurveda. Pressure. There are cells that, when you come to Ayurvedic massage treatments, this is very important. It is these cells that convey a signal to your body, to the rest of the body, these two cells, and so on. There are heat receptors here. There are cold receptors. And that complexity is all at ease in your body. Whether we know it or not, it doesn't matter. The intelligence in the body is looking after all these things. From that one cell, you went through embryogenesis and it unpacked all this logic for you. Are we appreciating that magic? Are we able to convey this to our students? I don't know if we are doing justice to this. We then come to the concepts, the ancient concepts, and a small term here, which all the Ayurveda people will understand from the first year. Sarva Dravya Panchabhotika. Now, are we conveying this correctly to our students? Are we understanding this correctly? Are we able to convey this correctly to a curious mind coming from another part of the world? I don't know. Slightly more sophisticated ideas, the influence of taste on doshas. So a very logical structure here, the 6 tastes and how they interact with the doshas. This is almost like the genetic code. There is no scope for error. If you understand the 6 tastes and the 3 doshas and the interactions, this is almost axiomatic. There is no scope. You cannot go wrong when you look at this structure. A slightly more sophisticated aspect of the Panchabhutic nature of life and the 20 gunas, the Vimshati gunas. A guna, of course, is known as opposites. Wherever you see opposites, a guna manifests. And these are the gunas, the 10 pairs, and shown here are the gunas of the different doshas. Are we understanding this correctly? And I want to highlight one. I talked in the earlier slide about the heat sensors and the cold sensors. And I want to touch on just this aspect. Hold this in mind, the cold and the hot. And I've shown in this the nature of the skin and the cell types that there are different cells that perceive this. And based on that structure, we can see the neurophysiology at play in how an Ayurvedic response works. And I see how such concepts do the bridging between all these sciences, between Ayurveda, modern medicine, between Ayurveda, yoga, between Ayurveda and Unani medicine, Unani and Siddha medicine. They all follow these principles. Are we fluent with those kind of ways of expressing this idea? The genes that are involved are these two. The short forms, TRPM8 and TRPA1. And this is the molecular logic that's used by the cells. I don't want to go into the details here, but these are pretty well researched genes. You can find information about this in PubMed, a very, very easy search. And you can understand about thermoreceptors and how the body appreciates cold and heat, and the grades of cold and heat, the cleverness in the body, and that is within each of those cells. As I said earlier, all of that logic starting off with one cell somewhere at the time post-fertilization. We have a challenge with us, and that challenge is seen in this wonderful portal that runs from the Ministry of Ayush. We have made standardized terminologies for Siddha, Unani, Ayurveda, and the morbidity codes for these two. Are we appreciating the significance of this? Are we instructing ourselves on how to learn about these things and how to use these things? And are we using this as a way to open dialogues between the disciplines? Maybe we are. Maybe we can do much more. And I feel that these are examples of how we should approach this area, including interactions with the WHO's ICD codes, International Classification of Diseases. I object in certain places in discussions with people in people in the ministry. I've raised my objections to this, but on careful reanalysis of my comments, I can see why this initiative is important for several reasons. I won't go into those here, but I think it's important for us to engage with that space, with the ICD-10 and future versions of ICD, so that we can start to familiarize people with Ayurveda and Unani and Siddha systems of medicine. Now, for the students of Ayurveda, one of the most important aspects should be these two ideas. The idea of Swasthvrit and Dinacharya and Ritucharya. This term and Ritucharya appears in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare's recommendations, Ayush recommendations. The information there is very brief. If we were to circulate that information amongst ourselves in the country, I don't know how many people will understand the depth and the meaning of terms like Swasthvrit, Dinacharya, Ritucharya. Whether we can then try and connect it with important biological aspects like the circadian oscillations is another challenge. But all of this aspects of Dinacharya and aspects of Ritucharya are being validated, and they're available in the scientific literature. So I refer here to a paper from 2010, published by Simon Ferrer and his team. Simon, at that time when he published, was located in Spain. He's now here at the Stem Cell Institute in Cambridge. Simon's work is very exciting in that he shows how there is a circadian oscillation in the movement of hematopoietic stem cells and mesenchymal stem cells from their niche in the marrow. And he has done a careful analysis using highly specialized reagents that target these cells, different types of cells, so that you can co-localize them or you can study them with standard fluorescence microscopy. And shown here are images from the skull bone marrow. Now, note this, the skull bone marrow. For several reasons, this is a good experimental tissue, the skull bone marrow. And what he has shown, now, first of all, is the niche, the home for these stem cells, is a tripartite structure. It has a mesenchymal stem cell, a hematopoietic stem cell that gives rise to all the blood cells, and an autonomic nervous input, a synapse. And this is very interesting. You suddenly see how the logic of interaction between the exterior and the finest of stem cells happens. There is a constant dialogue between stem cells, particularly the hematopoietic, and in this instance, the hematopoietic and the mesenchymal stem cell, and the external world. And what is even more exciting is when Simon follows the migration of these cells out of the bone marrow, he finds it happens, these migrations take place at a specific time of the day for a short window, which corresponds approximately to the Ayurvedic and the Vedic concept of Brahma Muhurt, which is 2 muhurts before sunrise, approximately. Now, we have been taught Brahma Muhurt. Most of us have heard this term, but we have not connected with the biologies. We've just parroted it. We have never understood this thing. And this is biology in action. And how our ancients knew this, I have no idea. But this is known to us for thousands of years and is being validated. Now, this is great excitement. It's being validated. Are we conveying this excitement to all our students? I feel all our students in whichever institution of the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences must be familiar with this information. And this is just one example of all the different areas of work. Now, I want to point out here one little bit about the skull bone marrow and also the very new observation about the lymphatic system that originates from the skull and feeds into the brain. This is very, very new information. And this is particularly important when we talk about certain Ayurvedic treatments. Certain treatments where we apply oils on the top of the head or oils on the forehead. And a good Ayurvedic physician sees lakshanas in this treatment. They know when the treatment has reached. They say if you place this oil on the top of the head, after a certain time, you will see a glaze in the eye, and the oil has percolated somewhere and come down into the system. It has reached the surface of the eye. How has it done it? At first we couldn't understand, but now it is all very clear that it's the lymphatic system that is connected with the skull leading into certain parts of the brain that actually takes all this stuff inside. And it seems like such a wonderful therapeutic approach, a very straightforward approach to access parts of the brain and parts of the head. So there is a lot of information that's being validated. We should be connecting with this and discussing this amongst ourselves, amongst our students, encourage our students to look into this kind of information. Now, the second aspect of Swasthavrit, living a good life, approximately, apologies for my crude translation. The second aspect is one of Ritu Charya. Now, the Vedic sciences talks about ritus, the seasons, of which we have 6 ritus in the Vedic systems. And the ritus are based on the lunar cycle. So every 2 full moons is contained within one ritu, and then you start the new ritu. And where the 2 ritus join is it's a technical term in Ayurveda called ritu sandhi. And there are certain treatments that are used, that are followed, which varies from region to region of the country, where specific treatments are recommended. My mother comes from Kerala, and we are familiar with a special treatment process called Karkadaga Chikitsa. It is a treatment that is a dietary intervention that is done at the onset of monsoons, so that when the month changes to just before monsoon, you start this treatment. It's basically kanji, a gruel of rice with about 40 to 50 herbs within it. And that combination of herbs varies for different districts, different parts of Kerala based on what's available, or very likely some kind of fine tuning that is done for every part of the state. Now, John Todd, an immunologist here working on type 1 diabetes, and now at the University in Oxford, was researching certain aspects of the immune system and trying to make analysis to see whether the genes for the immune process, whether they are expressed differently at different months of the year. And what comes out very surprisingly is out of the 4,000 odd protein genes that they found as part of this, as target genes that control immune activity, is what we see here. The different genes show variation in expression with the months. there are certain genes that are expressed very highly over the summer months, and vice versa. There are certain genes that are underexpressed. I won't go into the details here, but what is exciting here is that these genes, which are underexpressed during the winters, have an influence on the immune system. Now, for me, this is completely consistent with Ayurvedic reasoning about Ritucharya and how you have to prepare your body and adapt, get ready for changes in the seasons. The reference is here at the bottom for those who want to study. I will highlight a few more figures from this paper. One is about the variation in the 16 clock genes that were tested. The clock genes are the ones that control the biorhythm and the rhythmic expressions within the body. And this is what they find, that at least a small number of those genes show a seasonal variation. And 7 of the genes don't show seasonal effects. And this is very exciting because it gives you a handle on certain genes and which you can use as markers for how the physiology is changing, because these are the key genes that control physiology in the body in a very indirect way. But we now have that information. The paper is filled with incredible amount of information about the similar pattern expression in different parts of the world. And what I have highlighted here is how the genes and their expression follow the changes in seasons and the weather at different parts of the globe. The Southern Hemisphere, Australasia, shows a flipped over gene expression because their summertime is when our winters are in the Northern Hemisphere. There are implications of this on how you translate Ayurvedic knowledge to different parts of the world. And these are all points for further discussion and debate. The other very exciting aspect of the study is that the gene expression that they find in peripheral mononuclear cells, blood cells, is also found in the adipose tissue, which means it is not only the blood cells that are showing this, which come out of the hematopoietic stem cell that we talked about earlier. It is also the adipose tissue that is behaving this way. And once again, it is extremely consistent with when certain Ayurvedic treatments are followed. There is the Panchakarma procedure. There are recommendations that you do this Panchakarma at a certain time when the doshas are in a certain state. And there is much here that one can think about in tying all this with those recommendations in Ayurveda, which are there with us since forever. Now, let's move a little bit into where we are today with the COVID aspect. A simple, small virus, which is only 30,000 nucleotides long, how it generates such a heterogeneity of conditions. These are all the conditions that we see with people who present with symptoms. Not everybody shows the same problem. 14% show headache. This, how do you understand? How do you accommodate this heterogeneity? And this is a difficulty for everybody. Maybe the way we should approach this is not the way of the modern biology descriptors. Maybe there is another way, and that other way might be the one that is available in Ayurveda. A small study, which could also be done for locations in Karnataka, for instance. I don't know how much of this kind of data is being harvested for COVID patients, because there are many places where COVID patients are being treated. I don't know if this is being studied as closely as in this paper, where the symptoms are scored here on the left-hand side. And just a very simple scoring system to get the baseline information about what people are coming to the hospital. Are there more people with coughs and fevers, or more people with headache in that Indian community or within Karnataka? This is something, again, initiative that I don't know whether it's carrying on. Maybe it'll come up in a question and answer sessions. Maybe somebody will offer an answer, but it's something that we need to worry about. When we look at this data slightly more closely, this is, as I said, a study of hospitalized patients here in the United Kingdom, about 17,000 patients. The data shown here is segregated for age and sex. We find slightly larger number of males present in hospital for care and less females. The most striking thing in this data is that we never see people, at least in this data set, presenting in hospital under the age of about 40, 45. They have this problem. I don't think they're immune to it. They have the problem. A few days, the cold and cough lasts, and then it resolves. Is this the same in Karnataka? Is this the same in Maharashtra? These are questions that, that need to be asked and to be understood, because there is a lot of biology at play, a lot of biology that might not be appreciable using contemporary modern medicine descriptors, but will look extremely clear if we approach it using Ayurvedic descriptors. The other very important thing in this schematic here, in this graph, is how the severity and mortality increases with age. Now, this is also consistent with Ayurvedic knowledge, the concept of bala, how this reduces with age, and what might have to be done in terms of a public health measure, something that needs to be done more for the older people, particularly the older males, and more interestingly, for people with underlying comorbidities. Are we understanding this correctly? Is our public policy steps, is our COVID policies aimed at appreciating this kind of variation? That we must be taking a little more care of people who might have these complications, care of people who have chronic cardiac disease, diabetes, etc., asthma, etc. They are the people who will need additional looking after. What is it that we can do for it? Are we understanding this correctly? In terms of, these are all pointers for students and research projects and aspects for the future in terms of how we engage with students in teaching. Now, the work about the finer biology, about how this virus goes into the cells and the protein receptor, we hear about this every day. Everybody, I guess almost all students know about the ACE2 protein. Whether they're connected with the predominant locations in the body and the normal function of ACE2 and how it works, I don't know if that is appreciated as much as one should, because hidden within ACE2 are subtle concepts that come from Ayurveda about the pranavaha shrotas and aspects of the lung. Whether we understand that correctly, I don't know. Is my screen still on? Yes, it is. Wim Timmins at the University of Groningen in 2004 started characterizing the location at the protein level, and he found this located in almost every cell in the human body. What the function is, we don't know, but it's starting to be seen and might even explain the kind of heterogeneity that we see in the symptoms in individuals. Protein expression is highly variable because it comes out of not just the very rigid rules of DNA, but many other steps that are played out between DNA and protein. Epigenetic processes are there, and you can generate huge amount of variation, almost to a point where those rules prevent us from making important recommendations for how you would handle patients. But the Ayurvedic language might be the way ahead. We can also see a huge number of articles referring to Wim's paper, and also many more publications appearing now about plants that are being used and supplements, etc. More recently, there was a paper published from America, paper in Nature. This was covered in the New York Times less than 3 weeks ago, about the 3 immune types within humans. Now, at first, when we look at this trimodal distribution, the first thought that comes to my mind is whether this correlates to Prakriti types. I don't know. It's just the first thought. I haven't looked at it closely enough to see if there is a correlation. But this is the title of the paper, which appeared early this month. And it talks about immunological misfire in the severe individuals, the severe COVID types. And the classification is done in terms of the 3 types here and how the immune system responds to different pathogens. Again, I won't go into the details, but it would be very interesting to see if some of the information that is available about the Prakriti types map to some other factors, may not be directly to these genes and the gene profiles and the expression types, but somewhere in there, there might be something. Whenever I see this trimodal distribution in traits, I always think of our the 3 descriptors of doshas. When we look at the finest level of pathology and we look at the problems with the lung, especially the lung pathology that we see in COVID severe cases, then it gives us an opportunity to look at the finest details here between the single layer of cells, the epithelial cells at the very heart of the lungs, which is interfacing with the capillaries and the endothelial cells shown here in blue. What WIM's data about ACE2 tells us is that ACE2 is expressed at both these cells, on the surface of both these cells. So both of them are susceptible to abuse by the virus. Number one, if the integrity of these cells and the integrity of these cells are maintained, it's very likely you will have some type of resistance. What we also know is that there are a range of bitter receptors that are found in cells coming up to the alveolus, bitter receptors, which is described in Ayurveda as one of the tastes. And maybe there is something more that needs understanding. What we know is as we go, the other thing we know is as we go further up into the lungs, you start to see ciliated cells. Ciliated cells and the frequency of the beating of the cilia increases as soon as you offer a bitter substance into the system. And maybe that is the reason why the bitter, the so-called Katu Tiktarasa principles work in the case of COVID. Again, there is a lot of work to be done. These are early suggestions, but they're good pointers to where we might go in terms of integrated research. The finer physiology is that the virus attacks these cells, which are open to abuse. And some of them escape via these little gaps, which shouldn't be there, which is held together by a collection of proteins called the tight junction, gap junction proteins. If the health and the integrity of those interfaces are not correct, the virus can come in, they can interact with the endothelial cells, which in turn triggers a response that leads neutrophils to come down to the site to repair. And if this persists, and there is overproduction of what we call the neutrophil activated traps, then we run into problems. Shown here the kind of very fine structural analysis when you do, this is what you would see, fine DNA fibers that come out from the neutrophils. If these are healthy things, if they're not produced in excess, but when you have overproduction, they lead to the kind of complications, including small vessel coagulopathy that is now well established. The points I've made earlier is that there is enough evidence and enough information in the Ayush systems that should guide us into learning more about what people around the world are discussing and what we can offer them in turn. And that might be our strength for the moment, for several reasons, which I'll come to earlier. Now, what are the other modalities that are being used, and what are the modalities that are being funded? We always talk about funding to do research and wanting to engage with the community. This is one example about yoga that is being used as an intervention to promote mental health and well-being, particularly among the younger people. And this was a very simple but a very exciting project that got funded by the European Union, and there are further programs underway. So there are people in other parts of the world who are looking to the benefits and wanting some evidence and some guidance on how to do these studies. There is another funded study from the European Union, and this is called the Friends Project. It uses aspects of meditation to enhance behavior in school, reduce stress in children. So if you look at all these kind of happenings around the world, the question then is, what is it that we can offer as interventions? Is it going to be the same engagement for different parts of the world, or do we have to learn about demographic challenges in different parts of the world? Shown here, a few population pyramids for different parts of the world. This is the average population pyramid for about almost 8 billion in the world today. A reasonably good distribution, what you would expect. But if you look at other parts of the world, Western Europe with about 200 million people, this is what you see. Strange distribution of slightly older people. And as these people progress up this ladder, they will present with different complications. It's more aggravated in a small country like Austria. You will see unusual patterns here. What happens if you look at other parts of the world, and starting with the reference for the world, this is where India stands. And I feel India, we all know a very large part of the population, 40% or more, is under 20 years of age. And there we are. These are, in terms of COVID, these are people who will get infected, but they might not need critical care. This is a very crude statement, but I want people to start thinking in those ways, in where we are using high quality data, demographic data. Now, if you go into Africa, the 1.3 billion people for the 55 countries of Africa, you see an even more amazing structure there. There are certain countries in Africa where 50% of the population is less than 5 years of age. This is for all of the 55 countries. What kind of health policies should they have? What are the lessons they can learn from India? And what are the lessons they can learn from the unfortunate happenings in Europe, say for Italy? What can they learn, and what are the things they must prepare for the future? These are public health issues, but there are messages from Ayush systems for all of the world, for Africa, the 55 countries. What will we teach Africa in terms of Ayurveda? There are many lessons which become very, very clear in terms of what we know till now, and in terms of the fundamental principles that are in the Ayush text. Now, this is another epidemic that there are many other epidemics. It's not just the COVID epidemic. There are other epidemics, and this is an epidemic, obesity. Shown here from the WHO website. Nobody talks about this. Over 650 million people were obese. This is in 2016. And huge numbers. When I go to Austria, where we are doing a study on health of school children, we find almost 35% of secondary school children are obese. And why is this? Is education causing health problems? maybe we are not putting all this into our thinking and into policy making. And the thing is, obesity and other metabolic problems like type 2 diabetes, they're all preventable. And there are interesting lessons from Ayush systems, which needs to come to play in such discussions. Here in the European Union, the emphasis is on prevention and primary care. And this is not just for the European Union. There are many lessons from India that can come to the European Union. There are many lessons from this thinking here in the European Union about prevention and primary care to come towards India. And there are immense opportunities for dialogues between the European Union and perhaps a state like Karnataka, if you take the leadership in this space, if you can, and particularly colleges, well-established colleges like SDM Hassan or SDM Udupi, we might want to see if we can engage at these locations. We might want to see if we can engage a few staff members at a certain level, maybe at a level of a non-teaching professorial level, who will engage and take these messages from SDM Hassan, SDM Udupi to other parts of the world. These are all the way my mind is thinking about when we talk about this research and essential research for the third millennium. This is what the European Union recognizes. It is not new for Ayurveda, food as medicine. They have a very large effort in place on, which is now called, comes under this umbrella called Food 2030. 2030 is a very important space that is marked in many calendars for international organization, for the WHO, for the United Nations, for the WHO. Health for all by 2030. This is a very important step for the health policy makers. And within that is this issue of people's food, people's health. This is an issue that is so central and so important for India. What is the way in which we engage with this important theme? Shown here, the kind of activity that's happening in Europe may be something that could happen in India too, where food and nutrition classes are now held in restaurants. What is it that Ayurveda can offer in such engagements? And the waiter or waitress in this hotel shouting out loud in the back of the t-shirt saying, eat better, be happier, live longer, and engage in our talks. Maybe this is something that can be encouraged in locations like Bangalore or other parts of Karnataka. As I said, Bangalore is is a city that the world looks at. And maybe this is something that the Ayurveda colleges can engage with and have public engagement in these locations of this kind. What are the other things that are going on? And shown in the next few slides is a search. I call it the search for global best practice. Shown here, event that took place in February last year at the All India Institute of Medical Science, with a view to understanding physiology in terms of healthy lifestyle. Now, the theme that we got together to discuss was physiology for good health and prevention of non-communicable diseases. I was a little disappointed that we didn't have any Ayurveda people in here, but it doesn't matter because at least we know there is such an event that's happened, and maybe that event can be repeated elsewhere. We could hold such an event in Karnataka, maybe at St. John's Medical College or in one or other locations across the state to improve on this theme. And maybe Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences can catalyze this activity. The interactions that took place had universities, the medical university, one of the 5 medical universities from Austria, the European Ayurveda Association, and researchers from France. They will all be happy to come together to guide such activities in Bangalore or in Karnataka. Now, I've shift gears here a little bit to see what other areas can we engage in. are there other areas of fundamental research, the essential areas where we can connect with and enable new research projects. And shown here in the schematic, on the center here is representation of the autonomic nervous system. All of this talks almost directly and overlaps completely with Ayurvedic knowledge when we are doing certain treatments, the Panchakarma treatments. These are all those things that come to play and give you that healing response. Yoga and the yoga sciences offers a slightly different representation of the human body. And this is what we have in the Chinese system. I'm happy to say that there is now at least one research-driven company in Bangalore that is integrating all this, that is integrating the yoga thought process, the physiology and the modern physiology process, and the Chinese meridian knowledge, to put together a new instrument for studying pulse diagnosis. Maybe many of you in the audience know about this company. We can discuss this in Q&A session. What are the other large happenings around the world? And this is one very important area, which is the health policy forums in Austria, in a place called Gastein. You can see location, details of this location. The theme for the 2020 event is called Dancing with Elephants. And it's a very provocative title. And the subline here is New Partnerships for Health, Democracy, and Businesses. There is a lot of soul searching and thinking going on in every part of the world in where health needs to go. And these are places where we must encourage our young students to follow and engage and understand more about where health challenges are being appreciated and where they are being resolved. Early this year in Innsbruck at the university, we had a meeting looking at the paradoxes in human health. And we said, when we look at the system as it stands today, there are several narratives. The current narrative that we have is a disease-centric narrative. And that needs to move away to health and well-being and wellness and well-being. And what is needed is aspects of health promotion, health maintenance, disease prevention, and perhaps also new cures. If these three are taken care of, you might not need this. But instances like where we are today, COVID-19, maybe there are better treatments that may be given. And Ayurveda and Unani and all these systems are already showing some impact in this space. We need to monitor those numbers and see if there are trials underway, whether we are studying them correctly. There are experiments going on at the National Institute of Ayurveda in New Delhi. Perhaps some of our students can engage in that space and discuss a little more and help them shape the research better. And these are areas that are completely familiar to Ayurveda. And Ayurveda needs to make a louder voice in all of these things and say that our logic and grammar of these sciences are different. Now, we have friends in many locations. I just run through two of this, Unani medicine and Ayurveda. And if you look at these are training benchmarks for training recognized by the World Health Organization. I wish all our students will know and learn about these things and also know that these documents are sponsored by governments other than India. In this instance, the Ayurveda document, or the Unani document, was sponsored by the regional government of Lombardy in Italy, with Milan as the capital. And their calls are very clear. They want to know, how will you standardize the training of practitioners? There are opportunities for colleges like Hassan and other locations to start to engage with these nations directly. And also, what are the other aspects of healthcare? What are the options available? And if you flick through this, they're very small booklets worth study. If you look through, you will see how we can come up with new possibilities. Now, as I come towards the last part of my talk, I'll quickly flick through some aspects that I talked about earlier in terms of the receptors, the vanilloid receptors. These are receptors that are involved in the cell signaling between many of the compounds that are found in Ayurvedic, Unani, Siddha formulations, and what they do to enable change, physiological changes in the body. So all this information is available about receptors, and a lot of the neurophysiology is understood. But we need more people to engage in this space. I want to highlight this receptor here, which is abbreviated to TRPM8, which is the cold and the menthol receptor. Now, when we look at these receptors and see where they are located in the body, this is found in the nasal epithelium. Now, this is very important for us, particularly for the COVID aspect. And what we find is a possible explanation for how we have ingredients of this formulation that I mentioned earlier, that comes from the Unani system, and how it talks into the body through these receptors. And I've highlighted this title here saying Convergence and Unity for Integrating the Indian Systems. So within our systems of medicine, we have all of those systems, you know, Ayurveda, Yoga, Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha particularly. And where are we going to find common links between these disciplines? And it might be in details like this. Arkaji contains pudina, which is mentha, and ajwain, and camphor, kafur. And this is known to us since hundreds of years. This is a standard formulation in Unani systems. And when we look at it in terms of those receptors, we suddenly see the similarity of the molecular language that is used by Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha. And if we look at it in terms of yoga too, you will start to see links at that level, at that fine level of receptors and the neuronal signaling, you will start to see similarities. And this, I feel, is very important for us. Opening up our minds to interacting with the systems within Ayush. Let us, for a moment, not worry about engaging with modern medicine. Even within our systems, there is immense scope for exciting research. And this is what I meant by the research for the new millennia, which we shouldn't miss out, because those strengths are there within us. We have the colleges, we have the formulations, we have large databases that are curated with such information. What is even more exciting about Unani medicine, it talks about these zaruriya, the 6 essential factors. And these are so simple and central to every aspect of public health. And they overlap with the so-called sustainable development goals. And they're almost talking the same language, except this was given to us 2000 years ago in the Unani text. Now I talked briefly about where the links are between the environment and human health, animal health, plant health. This is nothing new to us. This is written in the Vedas, it's written in the Unani text, it's written everywhere in our Ayurvedic text. What is being done in the country? We have situations like Punjab, where we see very high incidence of cancers arising most likely from unwanted use of certain agrochemicals. What is happening in India? Are we waking up to the needs? It seems like we are. Not far from where you are in Nagpur is the Go Vigyan Kendra, where aspects of cow urine, gomutra, cow dung, gomai are being used for agriculture. They're training people to do this. Now, this is a wonderful development. They show you, they teach you how to do organic farming, produce sattvic ahar, rich in sattva, and limited in poisons that come into our food chain. And parallel to this thinking, we find similar thinking happening here in the UK. This is the UK's research and innovation resource. You can see details at this website. If you go in there, they talk the same language that is there in the Vedic sciences and ancient texts, but using a slightly different language of animal and plant health. Again, this is so central to all the discussions that we are talking about, the wider determinants of health and the One Health concept that is being discussed in many places. And we must draw all this into our narratives about health. Last week, I had an opportunity to present at one of the colleges in Chitradurga district. I think all of you are familiar with this college, and over that presentation, I had a chance to review information about that district with all the talukas, 6 talukas, and the number of villages. And maybe this is the level at which we must engage with our public health needs. This is the college inspired by this Swamiji. I think all of you know this location. Maybe something similar could be done for wherever we have institutions, whether it's homeopathy colleges or Unani colleges, wherever they are located in the 30 districts of Karnataka, we should develop networks of this kind of facility. Now, talking about resources, which is very important. Madam mentioned this early in the talk, that we need to engage both with the state government and the central government to see if we are resourcing our educational institutions and programs correctly. Now, most times this is the situation. You have all the resources at hand, but you are not using it correctly. There are things that we need to learn as to how we can use resources efficiently, correctly. For those of us who say we need to understand a little more about how we are interpreting the text, for those of us who don't read or are fluent in Sanskrit, as most of you are, there are problems for us. And we say, how is this knowledge, can we understand this knowledge differently if you don't know how to read the text? And the answer is simple, yes, you can. This knowledge is, and the sources that give rise to this knowledge and the logic that's behind this knowledge is there with us everywhere. Everywhere around you, this knowledge lives. And the question then to be asked is, are we going to do science to prove Ayurveda, or are we going to take Ayurvedic principles to help advance science? I fit into this second camp. And I hope there are many more minds here in our system who also recognize this. And we have Bhushanji now at the UGC, and maybe there is room for discussion here about their systems Ayurveda approach, shown up here in one of the lovely posters that was put together by Girish Pillu, Gigi Gangadharan, Bhushan Patwardhan, and Ashok Vaidya. And they are all people within close reach. Girish Ji will be with us later in the series, 2 days on, and start to question each of these aspects correctly. You know, what is Swasthya? And what are the finer ways in which you can interface these interdisciplinary things? Can Swasthya be taken to modern medicine? Can we understand it better? Can we understand the correlates? And what is there in the modern sciences that will help us understand the deep principles of Ayurveda? I feel this poster must be a resource for every student of Ayurveda, and we should try and make this available to them. Ayurveda reminds us about what we are, how we should visualize ourselves. Every individual is unique, but Ayurveda also demands that we move from that uniqueness to understanding ourselves as just processes. We are just a collection of processes. Sometimes in our pedagogy, we don't present this correctly. We present them as described in the modern medicine text. Ayurveda demands another way to look at this. And that is as processes, dynamic processes. These are corrections which may need to be done. And the three principles that we talked about, the Vata, Pitta, Kapha, are we understanding this correctly? Are we understanding in terms of gunas? When we go into the world of yoga, the deeper principles are found. It takes us into the realm of how this n equals 1 tends towards and connects with n equals 0. And shown here are representations that are known and described in yoga textbook. How do they correlate with representations of the human body and anatomy and physiology as described in modern medicine? Are there subtler aspects that are beyond the reach of modern medicine, but appreciated in Ayurveda and yoga systems? It seems like there are, and it seems like the mathematics for all of that is available with us already as early as 1860. 1860, James Clerk Maxwell, and prior to that, in 1840s, there were descriptions of things called flux tubes. Now, to me, when I look at this structure, this is just like a shrota, a mahashrota, shrotas, and which are described in Ayurveda. Herbert Frolley has written books about these, published 83 and 1988, on how systems work and how systems are understood. These must become standard discussion points in locations, perhaps in the Ayurveda colleges, or maybe in the other seats of learning like Indian Institute of Science. Maybe there's an opportunity to interact between Ayurveda colleges and IIC in Bangalore to look at all these aspects. Now, here in Europe, we are taking all those principles into account and trying to see if we can understand how the human body works in real time without disturbing the body. And we are using, inspired by the Chinese meridian systems, we are looking at two meridians, the large intestine and the lung meridian, and trying to see if we can map those disease and the hospitalization statistics and patterns that we saw for COVID-19. Is there something that is different in males and females? We've seen that data before about more males presenting in hospital into this stage, stage 3. Are there more males? Is there something different between males and females in different age groups? And is there something different in some measurable attribute? It could be a combination, an integration of Chinese, Ayurvedic, Siddha systems of medicine, put it together, and we arrive together with electrophysiology or bioelectrical measurements. We might arrive at some understanding of where young people are different from old in terms of these meridians. Now, the Chinese description talks about the large intestine and the lung meridian. For Ayurveda, in terms of COVID-19, I have seen both of these being used in descriptions in understanding COVID-19. This is the Mahashrota. Some people call it the Adhisthana of COVID-19 problem. And this, the lung, is the, of course, the location for the Pranavaha Shrotas. Plus, this is also the kapha-rich place. And there are many discussions going on in understanding this better. And maybe this is what comes out of the kind of integration that we talk about. In terms of the finer principles, these are the darshanas. And one in particular that I'm very appreciative of, and that I deeply appreciate, partly because I'm a lazy man and there are only 68 sutras to learn, which is Sankhya. And Sankhya within it holds all those principles, including flux tubes and those interactions between proteins and receptors. All of this can be understood from the 68 sutras. So that is my little bit of hobby. So in trying to finish off, this is where I want to live. I feel not only should we have interdisciplinary research, but within the Ayush domain, if we call all of the Ayush systems a discipline, then we need to start to think about intradiscipline research too. And this is very important. And a state like Karnataka is very rich because it has all those colleges running simultaneously. In Kerala, we have set up something called the Ayush Valley Foundation. And we feel Kerala is another state where these interactions between Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, homeopathy is happening in close proximity. In that small state, There are many colleges, and where all these practitioners are engaging with each other locally. And that is the intradiscipline interaction going on in the field. What are the missing aspects? And this is a paper from 2010. It is in the first issue of the new journal then, the Journal of Ayurveda Integrated Medicine. Ashok Vaidya called for a group of people who will be called the Vaidya scientists. And highlighted here is what I repeated earlier, that this whole thing of research is not to be taken lightly. As Sidney Brenner says, it's a lifelong passion. You just do it every day, and that becomes your way of engagement. We cannot have it otherwise. It requires that level of commitment. And Ashok Vaidya ji proposed this, and we had set up a small group based then in Yelahanka at the what is today the Transdisciplinary University. It is my hope that we will revive that program, and we will appeal to as many of the high offices as possible and present ourselves, maybe from Rajiv Gandhi University Health Sciences, together with other universities, to make another call for increased funding for this activity. And we must also look at the ecosystem. This is a lovely paper from Kishore Patwardhan, who was with us 2 days ago, one of the Vaidya Scientist Fellows. And he talks about the ills that are going on, the over-pharmaceuticalization of Ayurveda. And this was published in Ayu 2011. And he discusses very nicely why we should try and, we have to have this, but are we doing it correctly? Can it be consistent with the principles? This is a fact. This is where we are. Healthcare expenses are soaring across the world. I think I have a few figures here of the kind of research and development budgets that are made by the top 20 pharma companies, in this instance for 2015-16. They are spending amounts which we cannot even believe. And at the time of need, they have little to show. So there are some errors. And in terms of India's health budgets, these are the figures. This is what we have for the entire healthcare budget, about just under $10 billion, 10 billion US dollars, which is about the research and development budget for just one of the top 10, 20 companies. And within that, if you look at the Ministry of Ayush budget, 2010 crores. If my calculation is correct, excuse me if I haven't calculated this correctly, this amounts to about, for 2020-21, this is about $286 million. I'd like you to compare this figure against this figure, and you will see where we are in terms of budgets. We need to rethink this, and this needs discussion from senior members like Principal Sir and other people in responsible positions. Shown here for the projections for the top 10 selling products in the world. A lot of these are cancer products. Can Ayurveda compete in this space? Can we have interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary research that goes into examining this space? What is it that we can do as research projects? All of these are matters of discussion. We are raising these and discussing these in events here in Europe. This is a congress that is coming up. I encourage as many of you to visit this website, the World Health Congress website. The event will be held in Prague in next June. The dates are here, 11th to 13th June. Our website, World Health Congress, WHC2020prague.com. Join us, form a strong team, and let us discuss all these points. Also, event in London, scheduled for next year, 26-28 February. The question about integrated medicine. This is the European Congress for Integrated Medicine, and that's the website, worldwideweb.ecimcongress.com. Come to these events, come and engage and tell us about where you are and where you want to go. Medicine has its problems. seems more in Ayurvedic, in modern medicine than in Ayurvedic medicine, highlighted very nicely here by John Hewlett Jackson, a neurologist, and the founder of one of the prestigious journals of neurology called The Brain. He says correctly, it is not easy to get bad ideas out of medicine, whether it's research, whether it's teaching, whether it's practice. It takes 50 years at least. We've got to plan 50 years ahead to get rid of these bad practices. And then expect a little more time to get a good idea in. And prepare for the long term, 100 years, prepare for that future. And the other areas which must go hand in hand, health of our planet. And if you have healthy soils, healthy diverse ecosystems, then you have the foundations for building better life, healthier life. And these are things recognized by the WHO Commission. And this must become part of our standard discussions about planetary health, sustainable development goals, and how it interacts with many aspects of health, which are all part of the Ayush system and the logic that gives rise to the Ayush system. So this is my way of looking at this, how to arrive at an integrated view of health. So recently in discussions with Katoshji, he offered a metaphor for health. He says, you know, the two systems are like the two banks of a river. They will never meet. The two banks, and this knowledge, like a flux tube, this knowledge flows in between. Now, I beg to differ. I'm of the opinion that they are all interconnected. They are like a shrota, like a tube. And you have the knowledge systems like beads decorating the surface, the tube. And they are all connected. And it is that connection that provides for this knowledge to flow through. And so there are huge overlaps between systems of medicine, and there are ways in which you should engage with this. And I hope we can engage with developing new programs of research, new programs of work. A little bit of advertisement before I go away. The Ayush Valley Foundation is a new activity in Kerala. We invite you to join us to these webinars and discussions and become a part of the Valley. The next webinar is scheduled for a few days from today, and we'll be discussing this idea of Ayurveda, freedom for Ayurveda. You can see our earlier presentations on the website. They're archived in the website. Several important questions that are being raised, and I wish all of you will start to address these questions. I also want to quickly show the other activities that are going on. This is a very, very active group in Kerala, the Pampa Ayurveda group. Again, I welcome all of you to this event. And Vaidya Prasad is a very important person for us who is so dedicated to Ayurveda and the principles of Ayurveda. And he wishes to invite all of you to this event. With those few words, with a little bit of PR work, I finish there. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Yes, you rightly pointed about and elaborated explanation about Vadikshamatva and usage of a regular usage of Tulsi and Amalaki, and pointed about 15 indicators of the health, which is explained by second Buddha, Nagarjuna. With these points, we will take up some few questions, sir.
Thank you.
First question from the Dr. Amrita Gauri. With respect to molecular biology, there are many concepts in Ayurveda which need to be taken for the interdisciplinary research. Kindly comment on this, sir.
Yes, thank you, Gauri, for your question. It's a very open and a very wide question. Let me put it this way, that if you appreciate all of biology, as I said, Ayurveda tells us to look at N equals 1. We are a unit, and we are a unit held together with all those molecules, plus some other intelligence. I'm always of the opinion there is some other intelligence, and your question is about those molecules. Now, look at those molecules at many levels. Look at them in terms of the contemporary biology perspective as amino acids held together by bonds, or nucleic acids that are held together by certain things. I feel that is too limiting. And we should use the Ayurvedic perspective of the Panchabhutas. Reduce that down to the Bhutic level. See if you can look at aspects in terms of the 5 Bhutas. And keep in mind that there is nothing wrong with the principles of modern molecular biology. They're all perfect, they are fine. But there are places when they become inadequate to explain. They are very inadequate for explaining how the complex systems held together. So if you can find a way between respecting the Panchabhutic thinking and all the related principles, so Panchabhutic thinking arising from the 3 gunas and leading to the doshas and onwards to the dhatus. If you can keep all those principles together, then I feel you have a healthy, vibrant set of tools to dissect the biological system. So don't forget that the richness comes from understanding how this system works. How is the system held together? How does it work? If you look at it purely in terms of purified molecules and interactions between proteins, then you see only a very tiny aspect of that magic. The whole magic begins and has to be understood from the 2 gametes coming together and fertilization and the next step of embryogenesis and so on and so on. We can study things in isolation, but it will not look very beautiful. It will look a bit, it'll be just like the early walkings of a baby. You know, a baby is trying to walk and it's trying to understand the world. At first it crawls a little bit. It might seem like that. It might seem like those early steps if we look at it in isolation. So I hope I've conveyed correctly the way in which my mind works. In that I need to see the beauty of the whole system in operation. I need to see how the whole system works. And for that, yes, we can take the pieces apart, we can analyze them, we can make crystals out of these proteins, purify them, look at them at very high resolution. You do see valuable details from those analyses, but you don't see the bigger magic at play. And so this is where I feel our discussions must go. Whenever we raise the kind of questions you have raised, we must also not disengage from the Shastras and the Tattvas. We must be always connected, and we must be able to fall back and come back from those principles and say, well, what is prana? How does this whole thing work? What is described in yoga about prana? And how can we start to see the biology of prana? What is needed to see prana in action? What happens when you do pranayama? Which neurons are active? Yes, you can then go back to certain principles that control the breath circuit of the brain. For instance, the retrotrapezoid nucleus, the cells of the brain that controls the automaticity of breath work. But at the same time, keep in mind, there are molecules at play, but also something else at play. So if you have that flexibility, and if your mind is happy to work at that kind of flexibility, then we are going to make amazing progress that nobody will be able to compete with. I hope this, I don't know if it answers the question. I'm happy to qualify.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Dr. Gayatri Bhatt. We have references that during organogenesis, parental factors form a hard portion of the fetus and maternal factors form soft organs. How can we interrupt this?
Is this how, I don't know if this is how it is understood in the Ayurvedic appreciation, that you have maternal contributions one aspect of life and paternal contributions. There are many ways to look at it, and I see some parallels that we can make with modern biology. So, for instance, if you look at from a genomic perspective, DNA is found in every cell, and in our cells, the animal cells and human cells, we find two locations for DNA. So we have DNA in the nucleus and DNA in the mitochondria. They're the two locations for DNA in our cells. All of the mitochondrial DNA is solely inherited from the mother. So all those aspects of the mitochondria. So if all of us look at our DNAs and we look at our mitochondrial DNA, all of our brothers and sisters, all the DNA that mitochondrial DNA comes from the mother. That's one thing. Number two, we have the sex chromosomes, which is in the nucleus. Those contributions come from the father and the mother. And yes, if you look at the structure of the chromosomes, the X and the Y chromosomes, then you will see certain genes that are present in 2 copies on the X's in the female and only 1 copy in the male, with 1 Y chromosome coming from the father. If you look closely at the genes there, we might see something that goes into the description that you just mentioned about objects and certain aspects of organogenesis, certain contributions that come from male and female. There may well be other examples about, I must look closely at the genes for the hard structures in the body. So the way I would look at the hard structures in the body would not only be genes responsible for the skeletal structures or the teeth, where it's in calcium, but I will also look at the transporters of calcium, and I will look at the calcium binding proteins, and I will look at the organization of genes for those proteins in different chromosomes to see if there are certain things that are predominant in certain genes that are in the X and Y chromosomes and how they are distributed. So maybe there is some way to start to connect that logic. So thank you for that question. But what is clear is about the contribution of the mitochondria. The mitochondria is always maternal. And there is no contribution from the father in terms of mitochondria. And the mitochondria is a great controller of many aspects of physiology. And there is a lot of signaling between what we call retrograde signaling between the nucleus and the mitochondria. And there's always a dialogue between these two. And there may well be ways where we can start to dissect. But that question you ask is a very general question. And we have to hold that general question because there may be a lot of truth there, and there may be a way to understand many aspects that may not be visible if you go into the details. So you have to, it's like the forest and the trees, you have to understand the forest, the trees, and also the leaves to understand how the forest works. So that is the closest I can give you in terms of an answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for covering all the points related to the interdisciplinary research. Now I request Dr. Prasanna N. Rao, Principal, SDM College of Ayurveda, for the concluding remarks.
I'm here to mainly to thank Dr. Thangavelu. We had a great time with you. I'm sure we have answered the questions of the young researchers, especially who are looking for multidisciplinary research, and especially public health initiatives. What you discussed is really interesting, where Ayurveda community should give a step forward. The madam has discussed about the basic research. A focus on basic research is the time now where Ayurveda community, especially Ayurveda community, need to look into. And I think Thangavelu is one of the best example for interdisciplinary research. And being from the agriculture science to the medical science, everything. So this we need to integrate among our own systems. I remember Dr. Rama Sundar, professor of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, who worked on the effect of sub mantra on the brain cells. So such work need to be done even in Ayurveda, maybe as you said, Gio, this manaha ekatvam anatvancha. So though each cell has the mind and it responds to stimulation and a concept of shrotamayam idam shariram. Whole body is having a network that we understand with the different endocrine system too. And very concept of prakriti, like shukra shonita sanyoge garbhashayaste yo dosha utkataha sa prakritim jayate. So that particular time, how the spirit enters and activates. So this all things, probably the basic concept of Ayurveda, like Panchamahabhuta theory or Tridosha theory or Guna theory you have touched. And really, I realize nothing is impossible when emptiness is impossible. So when abhava is there, then we feel the bhavatva, the guna also. Same is the concept of Panchamahabhuta. You have given very intuition for us is regarding Sydney's genetic codes. I think we should touch on that point. And especially Ayurveda speaks that ekam shastram adiyano na shastra nischaya tasmat bahushutam jnanam janiyat bishak. For a doctor, focused knowledge may not be sufficient. He has to gather the information from different disciplines of the, maybe in respect of Ayurveda is health. So I really liked one more thing is people these days they very speak light about the massage. The massage, the Ayurveda speaks abhyangam achare nityam sa jara shrama vatapaha drishti prasada pushti ayu su twak swapna sutwak dhadyakrit. So if it can prevent the aging, if the external stimulation, external medication can prevent the aging, we should work on this point and show this world, yes, this works like this. This is the responsibility of Ayurveda. You have given a lot of insight for our fraternity who are inclined for research. I'm sure this thought-provoking your interaction for last 2 hours is definitely boost the researchers and the purpose of having this of a 10 days webinar program. I'm sure it will be fulfilled. On behalf of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, we wholeheartedly thank Dr. Madan Thangavelu. And I use this opportunity to thank our guide, mentor, and rather supervisor also for the curriculum and development from Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Dr. Pushpa Sarkar, Madam. You have stressed us to give more importance for basic research, which is very much essential. And you have given full time for us and guiding us, encouraging us, and especially young birds, releasing the motivation as well as the fund for the basic research for undergraduates.
Definitely, sir. And I was looking forward to listen to Dr. Madan, Dr. Madan Thangavelu, And it was an honor and it was an exhaustive speech. This I call as literary research, sir. You have done a literary research altogether, and it was a fantastic talk where you touched all aspects, sir. But even then, the transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary should have been a little widely done so. That is because of the policy makers, sir. This has to, this entitles for the policy makers along with researchers to tackle problems in the public, sir. That's
you, Madam.
what we were looking for.
We are looking forward to people like yourself and Prasanna Rauji and others, Acharya ji in SDM Udupi, to come together to shape this further. We always admire Prasanna ji and Acharya ji in SDM Udupi because they are very important for us. We need their guidance to help us understand our techniques and tools better. And in turn, we can engage with everybody and take this forward. So that is one request from my side. I also hope that we come together more frequently. And I know it's a lot of work to bring everybody together. So thank you so much to all at SDM Hassan. I can see how wonderfully organized you are and how beautifully you have done and brought people together. And I have been learning from it with each day, with starting with Savrika ji and all the other talks through to Kishore ji and yesterday. And I feel COVID has done something good for us.
Yes.
In one way. That this is becoming natural.
And this online interactions and where more and more people could join in.
Yes.
And congratulations to Dr. Prasanna Rao. You have been doing a splendid job and keep it up, sir. And this should not end here, sir. It should not end with the webinars. They should go on and on to the research activities too, sir. So
we look forward to
take a start. So take it forward, sir. We are with you.
Thank you so much. We will.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for your motivation and guidance. I think we will have a logical end in the last day, that is 28th. Our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. S. Sachidananda, will be speaking to you, all of us, and our Honorable Secretary of Ayush, Vaidya Rajesh Kutecha will be with us with the divine blessings from Dr. D. Virendra Hegde at 4 o'clock on 28th. Probably we will have a logical end, and I think that things will begin from there. Who is heading SDM institution. We have BHU institution, Bangalore, Hassan and Udupi, and Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, and the Ministry of Ayush, the secretary. All three will be there in this valedictory program. I request all of you to join that program too. And tomorrow's program, once again, I thank everybody for being with us and sharing the knowledge. Dr. please.
Chamki ji, I have one comment. I see so many questions that have come through in the chat box, and they're all excellent questions. And I'm not able to address what I have done there. I put my email address. I invite all of you to please reach out. Some very, very lovely questions here about the, from Professor Sanjay Lugare on TRP receptor theory and whether it fulfills some Ayurveda requirements, etc. There's so many questions here. I've made a copy of this, and I've also put my email address. Please reach out and let us discuss all these things. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Principal, sir. As we are seeing here in the Zoom, it is 77 participants, but in the YouTube, they are watching 1,500 participants. Since the last few days, 10,000 participants are been watching our webinar. With these words, I thank you, Dr. Pushpa Sarkar, Madam, and Dr. Madan Thangavelu, sir, for your precious time and thought-provoking session. I thank the members of the organizing committee for continued support and involvement, which made all the sessions successful one. Dear participants, please note, feedback link is posted in the chat box, and also it will be sent to your email ID, registered email IDs. Check it and give your feedback so that we can correct it for the future sessions. Tomorrow, that is 27th August 2020 at 3 p.m., we shall join back with same Zoom link to the next session on bioethics updates in COVID-19 scenario by the eminent speaker, Dr. Nandini K. Kumar, former Deputy Director General, Senior Grade, ICMR, New Delhi, and as keynote addressee, Dr. B. Yasho Verma, Botanist, Secretary, SDM Educational Society, Ujre. By this, we will conclude today's session. Thank you one and all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.